She thought she was his lover. She was actually his scapegoat. Evelyn Brooks walked into a billionaire's world chasing love. She walked out facing 47 million in fraud charges. But she wasn't the first woman Jonathan Hale had framed. She was just the first one who fought back. This is the affair that brought down an empire. Before we begin, drop a comment to tell us which city you are watching from, and when the story ends, don't not forget to rate us from 1 to 10, and please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. The FBI would later ask Evelyn a simple question. Did you know what he was doing? Her answer would determine whether she walked free or spent the next decade in prison. But here's what nobody could figure out. Who framed Evelyn Brooks for millions in missing funds? The money vanished from accounts she had access to, sure. But access isn't guilt, and the timing was too perfect, too clean. Why would a man worth $18 billion risk everything to silence one woman? Jonathan Hale had survived hostile takeovers, federal investigations, and a divorce that should have destroyed him. He'd built empires from nothing. So why was he suddenly so desperate to make Evelyn disappear? And then there's the question that kept investigators up at night. Was this love, or was it a calculated trap from the very beginning? Because when they pulled the security footage, when they traced the emails, when they followed the money, a pattern emerged. Evelyn wasn't the first woman in Jonathan's orbit to find herself in legal trouble. She was just the first one brave enough, or foolish enough, to fight back. Mistress or mastermind? Victim or accomplice? The prosecution had their theory, the defense had theirs. But the truth was something nobody saw coming. And the most dangerous question of all, what happens when the woman you tried to erase refuses to disappear? Evelyn Brooks wasn't supposed to be part of this story. She was a finance analyst at a mid-tier consulting firm. Smart, capable, the kind of woman who stayed late at the office, not because anyone asked her to, but because going home to an empty apartment felt worse. She'd spent her 20s climbing a ladder that never seemed to reach anywhere that mattered. She wasn't chasing wealth. She was chasing something harder to name. Recognition, maybe. The feeling that someone saw her, really saw her. And then she met Jonathan Hale. Jonathan was everything the business magazines said he was. Visionary. Relentless. A man who turned a failing software company into a global empire worth $18 billion. He sat on charity boards. He gave TED Talks about ethical leadership. He had a wife who smiled perfectly in photographs and 2 children at elite boarding schools. But what the magazines didn't mention was how he used charm like a scalpel. Precise, surgical. He knew exactly where to cut to get what he wanted. It happened at a corporate retreat in Napa Valley. One of those weekend events where companies pretend team-building exercises will solve structural problems. Evelyn's firm was consulting on a merger Jonathan's company was pursuing. She didn't expect him to remember her name. But that first night, after the keynote speech, after the networking reception had thinned out, he found her on the terrace. Just the two of them and the California stars. "You asked the only intelligent question in that entire room," he said. They talked for 3 hours. About markets, about meaning, about the loneliness of ambition. He listened in a way that felt radical, like her thoughts mattered, like she mattered. "People don't understand what it costs," he told her, "to want more than you're supposed to want." She should have heard the warning in those words. The meetings continued after Napa. Quiet dinners in private rooms, coffee at hotels where no one would recognize them. He gave her a phone, encrypted, just for them. "I trust you," he'd say, again and again. "You're the only person who really understands me. Trust me." It became his refrain, his anchor. The phrase that made her feel chosen every single time. She didn't know then what investigators would discover later. That Jonathan Hale had given encrypted phones to at least 4 other women before her. That "trust me" was always the line that came right before the trap snapped shut. Evelyn thought she was falling in love. She had no idea she was being framed. It started with a simple request. They were in his penthouse. Manhattan spread out below them like a glittering promise. Jonathan poured wine and said, "I need your help with something." Evelyn looked up. "Of course, anything." He explained it carefully. Calmly, his company was restructuring, moving assets offshore for tax optimization. Completely legal, he assured her, but complicated, the kind of thing that required someone he could trust, someone discreet. I need you to temporarily manage a few accounts, he said. Just sign off on transfers. Keep things moving while the lawyers finalize everything. She hesitated. Jonathan, I'm not sure I'm qualified for. You're the only person I trust with this. He took her hand. The board is breathing down my neck. My wife's lawyers are circling. I need someone on my side, someone who understands me. There it was again, trust, understanding. The words that made her feel essential. It's just paperwork, he said. A few signatures. A few weeks, maximum. So she said yes. The documents arrived by courier, pages and pages of dense legal language about offshore entities and fund transfers. Her name typed neatly on signature lines. Jonathan walked her through each one, his hand steady on her shoulder. Right here, initial here. Perfect. She signed. Over the next 3 months, Evelyn authorized transfers totaling $47 million. Money moving from corporate accounts to entities in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Singapore. Shell companies with names that meant nothing to her. Jonathan kept reassuring her, the audit's almost done, just a few more weeks. Her digital signature was on everything, her credentials, her authorization codes, a perfect paper trail leading directly to Evelyn Brooks. And then, on a Tuesday morning in October, everything collapsed. The FBI arrived at her apartment at 6:45 a.m. 8 agents, a warrant. They seized her laptop, her phones, her files. They froze every account she had. Evelyn Brooks, you're under investigation for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. The words didn't make sense. None of it made sense. There's been a mistake, she kept saying. I was helping with a restructuring. Jonathan Hale authorized everything. The lead agent looked at her with something like pity. Ma'am, Jonathan Hale reported the theft himself. 3 days ago, he claims you acted alone. Her knees went weak. By noon, her name was on every news site. Billionaire's mistress accused of 47 million theft. Her photo, the one from her LinkedIn profile, broadcast to millions. She tried calling Jonathan. The encrypted phone went straight to a generic voicemail. His assistant claimed he was traveling. Unreachable. She tried his office. Security wouldn't let her pass the lobby. She tried his personal number, the one he'd whispered to her in bed. Disconnected. And that's when Evelyn realized Jonathan had vanished. The man who'd promised her everything had erased himself from her life completely, as if their entire relationship had been a ghost story. But she wasn't a ghost. She was real. Her signature was real. And $47 million was really truly gone. The headlines were merciless. Billionaire's mistress. Seduced and stole. Greed in Gucci. How one woman betrayed a tech titan. Fatal Attraction meets Wall Street. They found photos of her. At charity galas. Getting into cars. Leaving restaurants. Every image carefully cropped to remove Jonathan from the frame, making her look alone. Calculating. Predatory. The comment sections were worse. Thousands of strangers weighing in on a woman they'd never met. Gold digger, homewrecker, criminal. She should have known better. She got what she deserved. Meanwhile, Jonathan Hale released a carefully worded statement through his publicist. I am cooperating fully with federal investigators. I trusted someone I should not have trusted. I deeply regret the pain this has caused my family. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't call her by name. He didn't deny the affair. He simply positioned himself as another victim. Betrayed, wounded, sympathetic. And Margaret Hale, his wife of 23 years, said nothing at all. No statement, no divorce filing. Just silence, the kind of silence that speaks volumes if you know how to listen. But while the media circus raged, something else was happening. Federal investigators were digging, and what they found didn't match the simple story Jonathan was selling. The shell companies Evelyn had allegedly used. They'd been established 2 years before she ever met Jonathan, registered under a lawyer's name, a lawyer who happened to be Jonathan's personal attorney. The offshore accounts. Their access protocols had been designed by Jonathan's own IT security team. Evelyn's credentials had been added, yes. But she wasn't the primary account holder. She'd never been. And then there were the communications. Jonathan claimed he'd had minimal contact with Evelyn, a professional relationship that had unfortunately become personal. He'd been foolish, he admitted, but not criminal. Except his company's servers told a different story. Thousands of emails, encrypted messages, voice recordings that hadn't been quite as permanently deleted as someone had hoped. The investigators brought in digital forensics specialists, data recovery experts, people who could find ghosts in machines. But Jonathan had resources too. His legal team was a wall of expensive suits and Ivy League degrees. They had their own experts, their own witnesses. A paralegal came forward claiming she'd seen Evelyn acting suspiciously, accessing files after hours, acting nervous. An accountant testified that Evelyn had asked unusual questions about offshore transfers. Questions that, in retrospect, seemed incriminating. A business associate remembered Evelyn being particularly interested in Jonathan's wealth, always asking about valuations, investment strategies. One by one, the witnesses built a portrait of a woman who'd been planning this all along. A long con, a calculated seduction designed to get access to billions. The indictment came down on a Thursday morning. 17 counts, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, tax evasion, witness tampering. The list went on for 3 pages. Jonathan Hale was arrested at his office, perp walk, handcuffs, cameras everywhere. The same cameras that had once captured him at charity galas now caught him with his hands behind his back. By Friday, the company's stock had dropped 42%. By Monday, the board had voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. 20 years of building an empire, gone in 72 hours. His assets were frozen, his passport revoked, the penthouse with the Manhattan views, seized, the private jet, grounded, the carefully constructed image of the visionary leader, shattered. Margaret filed for divorce that same week. She'd already moved $18 billion into accounts he couldn't touch. Accounts she'd been quietly preparing for years. She wasn't a victim. She'd been a strategist, waiting for the right moment. And Evelyn, the woman at the center of it all. The prosecutors offered her a deal, full immunity, witness protection if she wanted it, a civil case against Jonathan's estate that could have netted her millions in damages. The media wanted her story, book deals, streaming documentaries, a Dateline special, morning show appearances where she could play the survivor, the whistleblower, the woman who brought down a billionaire. Everyone expected her to take it, to cash in, to claim her victory lap. She refused everything. No book deal, no interviews, no settlements. "I don't want his money," she told her lawyer. "I never did. Evelyn, you could be set for life. I just want my life back." 6 weeks after the trial ended, Evelyn Brooks left New York. No forwarding address, no social media presence, no public statement. She simply disappeared. Not because she was hiding, but because she was done being part of someone else's narrative. The last person to see her was a journalist who'd covered the trial from the beginning. She found Evelyn at a coffee shop in a city she wouldn't name. "Don't you want people to know the truth?" the journalist asked. Evelyn smiled, tired but real. "They know enough. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm just someone who survived something I shouldn't have had to survive. What will you do now? Live quietly, work, maybe trust someone again someday. Maybe not. Do you regret it?" Loving him? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that he made me doubt myself, that he turned my trust into a weapon, but I don't regret being someone who's capable of trust. That's not a weakness. That's just being human." She finished her coffee and stood to leave. "One more question," the journalist said. "Do you think you won?" Evelyn considered this. Justice didn't look like victory. It looked like walking away alive. Jonathan Hale is currently serving 18 years in federal prison. He'll be eligible for parole when he's 73. Margaret Hale runs a foundation supporting women recovering from financial abuse. She never remarried. And Evelyn Brooks? Nobody knows for certain. Some say she's working at a small non-profit in the Pacific Northwest. Others claim they've seen her teaching finance at a community college somewhere in the Midwest. Maybe she's both. Maybe she's neither. What we do know is this: she's free. Actually free. Not famous, not wealthy, not vindicated in the way stories usually promise vindication. Just alive. Just herself. Which might be the rarest ending of all. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Was Evelyn naive for trusting Jonathan Hale? Or was she brave for refusing to let his betrayal destroy her capacity for trust altogether? Would you have signed those documents? Would you have believed him when he said, "Trust me," for the 100th time? It's easy to judge from the outside, to say we would have seen it coming, that we would have been smarter, more careful, but the truth is, we all want to be chosen. We all want to believe that someone sees us, really sees us. And people like Jonathan Hale, they know that, they count on it. The real question isn't whether Evelyn should have known better. It's whether the rest of us will recognize the warning signs when our turn comes. Because there's always another Jonathan Hale, another perfect story, another voice saying, "Trust me," at exactly the moment we most want to believe it. The affair that brought down an empire didn't end with revenge. It ended with a woman walking away from everything the world said she should want. And somehow, that's the most powerful ending of all. The federal case began to shift. Maybe Jonathan Hale was a victim after all. Maybe Evelyn Brooks was exactly what the headlines said she was. Jonathan appeared cooperative at every turn. He handed over documents. He sat for depositions. He played the role of the wounded but dutiful citizen perfectly. The investigators were starting to close the file. The evidence pointed one direction. Evelyn Brooks was going to prison, until one encrypted message refused to stay buried. A single text, recovered from a backup server that Jonathan's IT team had somehow missed, sent 3 days before the FBI raid. From Jonathan to someone identified only as M. It read, "Phase 3 complete. She signed everything. Initiate withdrawal protocol and alert federal contact. This one's cleaner than the last." The last. That one word changed everything, because it meant there had been others. The message landed in 3 inboxes simultaneously: the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, ProPublica, no return address, no identifying information. Just a compressed file containing 18 months of communications between Jonathan Hale and Evelyn Brooks. But these weren't the passionate exchanges of lovers. These were instructions, scripts almost. Sign the transfer authorization exactly as written. Don't add any notes. If anyone asks, tell them I personally approved everything. Use the credentials I gave you. Don't create your own login. Message after message. Jonathan wasn't confiding in Evelyn. He was directing her, positioning her, building a case against her while making her believe she was helping him. And then the audio files. Someone had been recording their conversations. Every meeting in that penthouse. Every reassurance. Every "trust me." The journalists verified the recordings with forensic audio analysts. They were authentic, unedited. In one particularly damning clip, Jonathan's voice is clear and calm. The beautiful thing about using someone like Evelyn is that nobody will believe her. Former mistress accuses billionaire. That's not news. That's predictable. Another voice responds, older, male. What about the others? The others didn't have enough access to make it believable, but this one, she's perfect, smart enough to authorize complex transfers, naive enough not to ask the right questions. The others. Investigators reopened files that had been closed for years. 3 women, all had brief relationships with Jonathan Hale. All had been accused of financial impropriety shortly after the relationships ended. All had settled quietly, signing NDAs, disappearing from public view. Jonathan Hale hadn't just framed Evelyn Brooks. He'd been running this play for years, a pattern so consistent it could have been a business model. And the motive? It wasn't about $47 million. Jonathan Hale could lose that much in a market fluctuation and not blink. It was about control, about moving money in ways that would trigger scrutiny, about needing someone to blame when regulators started asking questions, about building an escape hatch for financial maneuvers that couldn't survive sunlight. He needed a scapegoat. And he'd found the perfect candidate, a woman who loved him, who trusted him, who wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. But Jonathan Hale had made one critical miscalculation. He underestimated her survival instinct. Because while Evelyn had signed everything Jonathan asked her to sign, she'd also kept copies. Screenshots of their conversations, her own recordings, made on instinct when something started feeling wrong. A detailed journal documenting every request, every transfer, every moment of doubt. She hadn't known what she was documenting, she just knew that something about Jonathan's reassurances felt rehearsed, performative. So she'd created her own insurance policy. And when the walls closed in, when her name was destroyed and her freedom hung by a thread, Evelyn Brooks made a choice. She didn't run. She didn't take a plea deal. She didn't disappear like the others. She handed everything to the FBI, every message, every recording, every piece of evidence she'd carefully preserved, and then she agreed to testify. The courtroom was packed. Every major news outlet had cameras outside. Inside, the air felt electric, suffocating. Jonathan sat at the defense table in an immaculate suit, flanked by 7 attorneys. He looked calm, almost bored. Until Evelyn walked in. She'd lost weight. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the oath, but her voice was steady. The prosecutor walked her through the timeline, the meetings, the documents, the moment she realized what was happening. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" the prosecutor asked. Evelyn's eyes found Jonathan across the room. "Because I loved him. And even when I started to suspect, I didn't want to believe someone could be that calculated, that cruel." Jonathan's lead attorney cross-examined her aggressively, trying to paint her as bitter, scorned, a woman fabricating evidence out of revenge. "Isn't it true you expected Mr. Jai Hale to leave his wife for you?" "No. You never wanted his money. I wanted him to see me. That's all I ever wanted. And when he didn't, you decided to destroy him." Evelyn's voice finally broke, just slightly. "I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was trying to breathe." The courtroom went silent, and then, on the 7th day of testimony, Margaret Hale entered the witness box. The prosecution hadn't called her. The defense certainly didn't want her there, but she'd invoked her right to testify. For 23 years, Margaret had played her role perfectly. The elegant wife, the silent partner, the woman who smiled in photographs and asked no questions. But Margaret Hale wasn't silent anymore. "I knew," she said, "about the women, about the shell companies, about all of it." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Mrs. Hale, are you saying you were aware of your husband's criminal activities?" "I'm saying I kept the real books, the ones he thought he'd destroyed." She produced a thumb drive. Financial records going back 15 years, offshore accounts, bribes, tax fraud, a criminal empire hidden behind charitable donations and TED Talks about integrity. "Why now?" the prosecutor asked. Margaret's smile was cold. "Because he made one critical mistake. He assumed I needed him more than I needed the truth." She looked directly at Jonathan. "I want a divorce, and I want you in prison." The cards had collapsed, not slowly, all at once. In the end, power didn't destroy Jonathan Hale. The lie he told himself did. The lie that no one would believe her, that trust was something he could weaponize without consequence, that he was untouchable. He was wrong. So here's what I want to know from you. Was Evelyn wrong to expose him? Should she have taken the money and walked away quietly like the others? And where do you draw the line between love and loyalty? At what point does protecting yourself become more important than protecting someone you love? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you think this story was shocking, wait until you hear what happened when a billionaire trusted a tarot reader with his marriage. Secrets, manipulation, and a prediction that came true in the worst possible way. Subscribe for more real stories where love, power, and truth collide. Because the truth, it's always stranger than fiction.